don't need to be a monster to do monstrous things. You just need to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Lucifer effect is not just a fascinating concept. It's a window into the human psyche. Its name comes from the biblical figure of Lucifer, the fallen angel, the one who had it all and yet chose the path of darkness. But we're not here to talk about religion. We're here to talk about psychology, philosophy, about you. Think of the cruelest person you can imagine, a tyrant, a war criminal, someone who has committed unimaginable acts against other human beings. Now think of someone kind, compassionate, incapable of causing harm. What sets them apart? Their genetics, their upbringing, or simply the circumstances they were placed in? What if I told you that you too could fall into this? That evil is not an exclusive trait of monsters, but a latent possibility within all of us. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo sought to answer one of the most disturbing questions about human nature: what turns us into executioners? To do so, he designed an experiment that ultimately revealed an uncomfortable truth about the fragility of our morals. An experiment that had to be shut down early because the line between simulation and reality so completely vanished. Imagine this. A group of students is divided into two groups, prisoners and guards, inside a simulated prison at Stanford University. They were just regular young people, like you, like me, with everyday lives, friends, aspirations. But the moment they were assigned their roles, everything changed. Day 1. The students are divided into prisoners and guards. It all seems like a simple role-playing exercise. The guards receive uniforms, sunglasses, and wooden batons. The prisoners, on the other hand, are dressed in gowns and assigned a number instead of a name. The atmosphere is tense, but controlled. Day 2. The guards begin to take their roles too seriously. Small orders turn into subtle abuses. What started as a prison simulation now becomes a real power struggle. The prisoners start showing signs of stress, and the guards grow more aggressive. Day 3. Violence erupts. Punishments, humiliation, submission. The prisoners begin to break down emotionally. They are forced to perform exhausting physical exercises and are denied basic comforts. Desperation takes hold, and some attempt to rebel, only to be punished even more severely. Day 4. The situation keeps escalating. The guards become increasingly sadistic, enjoying the power they have over the prisoners. Social and moral norms seem to disappear within the walls of the improvised prison. The prisoners are trapped in a cycle of abuse and submission, with no hope of escape. Day 5. The psychological pressure is unbearable. Some prisoners enter states of emotional shock, while others show signs of mental distress. The guards, blinded by power, ignore their cries for help and continue their abusive behavior. The experiment turns into a true battlefield between morality and blind obedience. Day 6. The experiment spirals out of control. Zimbardo, trapped in his own study, realizes the hell he has created. He watches in horror as ordinary everyday people have transformed into perpetrators and victims. Aware of the harm he is causing, he decides to put an immediate stop to the experiment. The experiment is cancelled, but the question lingers. To what extent could any of us become executioners if the circumstances allowed it? But the question lingers in the air. Were they monsters? No, they were ordinary people, like you, like me. But the damage was already done. The guards, regular individuals, had turned into sadistic figures. The prisoners, also students like them, had been reduced to utter despair, and all of this happened in less than a week. This is what Philip Zimbardo called the Lucifer effect, proof that evil is not something inherent in people, but something that can emerge in anyone if the circumstances allow it. And this experiment is not just a theoretical exercise. Its echo reverberates through real history. In the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, the unthinkable became reality. A place meant to be just a detention center turned into a nightmare. U.S. soldiers, tasked with guarding detainees, carried out abuses so horrifying they could only be compared to the worst accounts of torture. Humiliation, suffering, dehumanization. And the most disturbing part, the perpetrators weren't monsters. They were ordinary people. People who, outside of that context, had families, laughed with friends, led normal lives. But within that structure, where their power had no limits and their actions had no immediate consequences, abuse became routine. Who do we become when no one is watching? Looking even further back, the Nuremberg trials after World War II forced humanity to confront one of the most chilling questions in history. Nazi officers, responsible for atrocities that wiped out millions of lives, defended themselves with a phrase that still sends shivers down our spines. I was just following orders. But does that absolve them of the irreversible? Were they monsters before the war? Or were they shaped by a system that stripped them of their humanity? They weren't born with a desire to commit genocide. They were transformed, dehumanized, turned into tools of a machine that allowed them to act without guilt, shielded by blind obedience. How much of that transformation could happen to any of us under the wrong circumstances? And here's where history leaves us with a warning. Dehumanization doesn't only happen on battlefields or in prisons. Imagine working at a company where everyone follows orders without question. One day your boss asks you to alter the results of a project to make them look better. Everyone does it. It seems minor. No one questions it. But you pause and think, what does this mean for my integrity? Am I willing to sacrifice my ethics just to fit in? Dehumanization doesn't start with grand atrocities. It seeps into the small, everyday choices, the compromises we make in the name of authority or convenience. And just like that, without realizing it, the line between right and wrong begins to blur. Until one day we find ourselves on the other side. So, tell me, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt that what you were being asked to do wasn't right, but you did it anyway? Have you ever felt safer or more justified in your actions because you knew you wouldn't be identified? The reality is that we are surrounded by social forces that push us to conform, to do what is expected of us without questioning the morality of our decisions. Social pressures, the expectations of others, the fear of losing our position or reputation. All of these play a significant role in how we react when facing ethical dilemmas. Now, pause for a moment. Make a mental list of your principles, those values you consider unbreakable. Reflect on a time when those principles were put to the test. What did you do in that moment? Did you let yourself be influenced by external pressure, or did you stand firm in what you believed was right? Don't underestimate the importance of questioning your decisions at every step. The next time you face a dilemma, whether at work, in your personal life, or even in everyday interactions, ask yourself, am I acting according to my values, or am I just going with the flow? I want to hear from you. How would you react if you were asked to hurt someone? Even if it was something small, would you question it? Or would you do it simply because someone else asked you to? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's reflect together on how to find that balance between staying true to our principles and navigating the world around us. And today, in the digital world, we can see a more subtle but equally destructive form of this phenomenon. The anonymity of the internet has turned ordinary people, who would never insult a stranger on the street, into cruel attackers on social media. They humiliate, threaten, dehumanize, because the screen gives them the same feeling that a uniform or a mask does: permission to act without real consequences. So, what drives us to become executioners? First, unchecked power. When someone is given authority without restrictions or clear consequences, abuse becomes tempting, not because they seek to harm from the start, but because the feeling of control is addictive. It's like a slow-acting poison. At first, it feels like just a small dose of power, but over time it spreads until it begins to distort our decisions and behavior. This is why power abuse is so common in institutions where control becomes an end in itself, just like in Zimbardo's experiment with the prison guards. But you don't have to be a prison guard to understand this. At work, in families, in politics, there's always someone with access to a little more power, and that's when one must ask, how am I using this power? Am I helping, or am I subjugating others? Second, loss of identity. When someone hides behind a uniform, a mask, or an ideology, their sense of personal responsibility fades. Individual identity dissolves into the crowd, and with it, guilt disappears. How far could any of us go if we found ourselves in the wrong environment? The real question is, how can we avoid falling into that trap? When a person hides behind a uniform, an ideology, or the anonymity of the internet, their sense of responsibility fades. They no longer act as an individual with their own judgment, but as just another cog in a system. And when we don't feel the weight of our decisions, justifying harm becomes dangerously easy. Think about this. How would your behavior change if you knew that no one would ever recognize you or hold you accountable for your actions? If you had total impunity, would you still act according to your values? This is why certain environments can be so dangerous. When we hide behind a uniform, a screen, or an ideology, the line between right and wrong becomes blurred. Blind obedience is another key factor. From a young age, we are taught to follow orders and respect authority, which is necessary for social order. But in extreme cases, this obedience turns into a dangerous weapon. How often do we question what we are told? The soldiers at Abu Ghraib, for example, were not born monsters. They were ordinary people who, under the premise of just following orders, committed unthinkable acts. In their minds, they were not responsible. They were merely executing what a higher structure dictated. This leaves us with an uncomfortable question. Do we really know when we are obeying for the greater good and when we are simply being swept along by the current? So, how do we avoid falling into these traps? How do we ensure that power doesn't corrupt us, that ideology doesn't dehumanize us, and that authority doesn't strip us of our moral judgment? The first step is awareness. We must learn to recognize the subtle signs that indicate we are straying from our values. For example, at work, if you start feeling that your position makes you superior to others, or that their needs no longer matter as much as your own interests, it's time to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, how do my actions affect others? The second step is questioning authority. This doesn't mean rebelling for the sake of it, but rather critically analyzing the orders we receive. Blind obedience can lead us to do things we never imagined. The next time someone asks you to do something that makes you uncomfortable or seems immoral, stop and ask yourself, why does this person have so much power over me? Is what they're asking truly aligned with the greater good? History has shown that no one is immune to these influences, but by staying aware and questioning the structures around us, we can resist the temptation to be led down that path. A practical example of this can be seen at work. Imagine your boss asks you to do something you don't consider ethical. Instead of obeying without question, you can start a conversation and discuss the possible negative impacts of that action. Many times, a simple question can make others reflect as well. But there's something even more powerful: empathy. It's the antidote to dehumanization. It's easy to see others as the other, but behind every person, there's a story, emotions, fears, and dreams. Practicing empathy doesn't require grand gestures. It can be as simple as asking genuine questions, actively listening, and trying to understand another person's perspective. This daily practice not only strengthens our relationships, but also protects us from falling into the emotional detachment that enables abuse of power. Now tell me, are you sure you would never fall into this? It's easy to believe that, in our current circumstances, we would never be swayed by power, ideology, or blind obedience. But history has shown time and time again that even the most ethical people can get swept away when circumstances change. And the most terrifying part, the victims are not always others. Evil consumes you too. It dehumanizes you. And when you finally realize what you've done, it might be too late. But there is a way to prevent it: recognizing the signs, questioning authority, and keeping empathy alive. Evil is not a monster lurking in the shadows. It is not something foreign to us. It is a latent possibility within every person, waiting for the right moment to emerge. But it's also a reminder of what we stand to lose, or the humanity we can still preserve if we remain vigilant. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where your morals are tested, remember, evil doesn't start with a monster. It starts with a choice. And in the end, that choice is always yours. Now tell me, are you completely sure you would never fall into the Lucifer effect? Let me know in the comments. After all, understanding our darkness is the first step to embracing our light. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because as I always say, the truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. Until next time, explorer of the mind. Have you ever wondered why the world seems to be full of people who test your patience every day? That work meeting that's supposed to be productive but turns into a battlefield of inflated egos. That driver who cuts you off and then has the nerve to insult you, as if you were the problem. Or maybe someone closer, a friend, a family member, someone who exhausts you just by existing. But is it just your impression, or is the world truly infested with idiots? Robert Sutton, the author of the book that inspired this video, makes it clear: idiots exist. They are everywhere. And the worst part is that they thrive in environments that encourage their toxicity. If you feel surrounded by them, trust me, you're not alone. But here's the real question: how do you identify them and avoid them without losing your sanity? Because if you've ever spent entire nights replaying a pointless argument in your head or felt your energy drained just by being near someone, You know this isn't just about dealing with others. It's about protecting your own peace of mind. Mark Twain said it best. Never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. And yes, that makes sense. But what happens when the idiot in question is your boss, your coworker, or even a family member? The real problem with idiots isn't just the momentary annoyance they cause, but the silent damage they leave behind. They can destroy your productivity, erode your self-esteem, and turn any environment into an emotional minefield. And no, this video isn't just a collective rant, because complaining about them won't make them disappear. The goal here is to give you a real survival strategy, how to recognize them, how to neutralize their impact, and most importantly, how to preserve your peace in a world that often seems designed to test our limits. If you've ever felt surrounded by people who seem programmed to push your buttons, stay with me, because understanding how the minds of idiots work and learning how to deal with them can be the difference between living in peace or spending your life trapped in their toxicity. But there's something Sutton teaches us that is crucial. Identifying an idiot isn't just about pointing fingers. It's also about recognizing the effect they have on you. Because the uncomfortable truth is that if you spend too much time around idiots, you might start absorbing their behavior. Without realizing it, you could begin to normalize abuse, become cynical, irritable, and defensive. You might even start acting the same way. That's why the first step to dealing with idiots is recognizing them for what they are. If someone constantly makes you feel less, if their presence alters your mood, or if you have to mentally prepare yourself to interact with them, you may have identified an idiot in your life. Now the question is, how do you deal with this? And more importantly, how do you prevent their toxicity from becoming your own? Living with idiots isn't just irritating, it's harmful to your health. And no, this isn't an exaggeration. The toxic behavior of these people doesn't just ruin your day, it can compromise your physical and mental well-being in the long run. Studies show that continuous exposure to negative environments can increase chronic stress, raise blood pressure, and even shorten life expectancy. In other words, that passive-aggressive coworker who pushes your buttons every day isn't just ruining your mood. They could literally be shortening your life. The toxicity of idiots isn't limited to fleeting moments of irritation. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like someone drained your energy, as if somehow you lost a piece of your sanity? This happens because negative interactions activate our defense system, releasing cortisol, the stress hormone. If this happens occasionally, it's no big deal. But when exposure is constant, your brain enters a permanent state of alert, affecting your sleep, concentration, and even your ability to make rational decisions. The impact of idiots extends to other areas of your life as well. Research has shown that employees in toxic work environments often bring that stress home, affecting their relationships and self-esteem. You may start doubting your abilities, losing motivation, and over time, even avoiding social interaction, even with people who have nothing to do with the toxicity you're experiencing. Moreover, when you're surrounded by idiots, your own behavior can change without you even noticing. Sutton explains that negativity is contagious. If an environment is dominated by manipulative and aggressive people, even those who aren't naturally like that can become reactive, distrustful, and even hostile. It's like breathing in an invisible smoke that slowly intoxicates you, until one day, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person you've become. Another key point: the mental energy you waste dealing with idiots could be used for something far more productive. How many times have you spent hours mentally rehearsing responses to a toxic person? How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying pointless arguments in your head? When you allow idiots to take up space in your mind, you give them a power they should never have. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." But of course, all of this is easier said than done. Because when you deal with an idiot daily, whether at work, within your family, or in social circles, ignoring them isn't enough. You need to develop strategies to minimize the impact these people have on you. In the end, if living with idiots can steal your peace, learning to avoid them might be the key to getting it back. Take a moment to reflect. Who are the idiots draining your energy today? And more importantly, how can you start protecting yourself from them before they take an even greater toll on your sanity? The secret isn't about beating them at their own game, but learning to neutralize them without draining your energy. The best strategy to dodge an idiot isn't to confront them directly, but to make them irrelevant in your life. The first technique is one of the most powerful yet least used: calculated indifference. Idiots thrive on reactions. They live to provoke, irritate, and manipulate. When you respond with anger or frustration, you fall into their trap. But if you treat their words and actions as insignificant, they lose their power over you. This isn't about ignoring everything but choosing your battles wisely. Ask yourself, does this person really deserve my energy? Most of the time, the answer is no. Another key resource is strategic emotional control. A common mistake when dealing with idiots is reacting impulsively. But patience and silence can be more effective weapons than any sharp reply. When you don't rush to respond, you stay in control. Take a deep breath and answer only if necessary, in a calm and objective manner. Nothing disarms an idiot more than seeing they failed to get under your skin. If you can't avoid a toxic person, like a coworker or a boss, you need a psychological shield. Imagine that person as a predictable character who always behaves the same way. This reduces the emotional impact of their words. Instead of thinking, "They're attacking me," think, "Here they go again with the same ridiculous attitude." Creating emotional distance prevents their poison from affecting you. But what happens when the toxicity becomes unbearable? There are moments when confrontation is inevitable. The key is to do it strategically. Never expect an idiot to change. Instead, set clear boundaries. Be direct and leave no room for misinterpretation. "I'm not going to accept these kinds of comments," or "If you continue, I won't engage in this conversation." Don't get into debates. Idiots use them to twist everything. Be brief, firm, and end the discussion. Humor is also a powerful weapon. Idiots take themselves too seriously, and a dose of irony can throw them off balance. If a boss tries to belittle you with a sarcastic remark, instead of justifying yourself, respond with a smile and a witty comment. This not only protects you, but turns the provocation back on them without losing your composure. Finally, there's the ultimate solution: intelligent distancing. If toxicity is the rule rather than the exception, consider leaving that environment. Sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to walk away. No salary, friendship, or commitment is worth living in a space that destroys your peace of mind. Dealing with idiots isn't about defeating them. It's about making sure they don't defeat you. Protect your energy, choose your battles, And remember, the best way to beat an idiot is to refuse to play their game. In these situations, silence can be interpreted as weakness. That's why the secret isn't just choosing between confrontation or ignoring. It's knowing which strategy to use in each scenario. When to ignore. Ignoring an idiot is the best option when the interaction has no real consequences for you. If it's a stranger online trying to provoke you, a coworker whose comment doesn't affect your reputation, or a distant acquaintance throwing meaningless passive-aggressive remarks, the best move is not to play their game. In these cases, silence shows that you don't care, and nothing frustrates an idiot more than realizing they failed to make an impact. But there are moments when ignoring can be dangerous. If someone in your workplace is trying to discredit you, spread rumors, or undermine your authority, staying silent will only give them more space. If someone uses passive aggressiveness or subtle humiliation to belittle you, ignoring them can be seen as acceptance. And if a friend or family member repeatedly crosses your boundaries, silence can perpetuate the cycle. When to confront. Confronting an idiot doesn't mean engaging in an emotional fight. If you lose your temper, they've already won. The ideal confrontation is cold, calculated, and based on facts. Sutton suggests that, whenever possible, publicly exposing an idiot's behavior is one of the most effective ways to disarm them. Imagine a coworker trying to take credit for your work in a meeting. Instead of arguing or making a scene, you could simply say, "I'm glad you liked my idea. I developed this concept after a lot of research, and I'm happy to see it's being well received." No aggression, no fights, just a clear statement that neutralizes their attempt at stealing your recognition. Another crucial factor in deciding whether to respond is power. Where does this idiot stand in the hierarchy of your life? If it's a direct superior at work, an open confrontation could have negative consequences, making it smarter to document their actions and seek support through proper channels. If it's someone at your level, a strategic response may be enough to set boundaries. And if it's someone below you in the power structure, it's essential not to lower yourself to their level. But there's one key detail that most people overlook when choosing between ignoring or confronting. Your peace of mind is worth more than being right. Sometimes, the emotional toll of staying engaged in a battle with an idiot is higher than simply walking away. Sutton reminds us that some battles are worth fighting, while others only drain us. The key question is, will confronting this person actually change anything, or will it just pull me deeper into this toxic cycle? Response. Strategies. One powerful technique when responding is the mirror effect. If an idiot constantly interrupts you, interrupt them at the same rate and say with a smile, "Do you like being interrupted? No? Then let's try talking without doing that." If someone uses sarcasm to undermine you, return it with the same tone, calculated and precise. The secret is to never show that you're emotionally affected. If an idiot senses that they've destabilized you, they'll keep doing it. In the end, the best way to defeat an idiot isn't to destroy them. It's to make them insignificant. Whether you respond or not should always be your decision, based on what benefits your peace of mind, not just the desire to get even. True power isn't about winning pointless arguments. It's about controlling where you invest your energy. So ask yourself, does this person really deserve a response? Or is the best revenge simply refusing to let them take up space in your life? Restoring your peace of mind. After identifying, dodging, and when necessary, confronting idiots, the most important question remains: how do you restore your peace of mind? How do you prevent other people's toxicity from contaminating your life? The answer isn't in changing the world. There will always be idiots, but in creating a mental and emotional space where they have no influence over you. The first key to this is understanding that you don't need to win every battle. At some point, you have to accept that some people simply won't change. Some arguments will never have a satisfying resolution, and your energy is a limited resource. Often your sanity depends on letting go. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Another essential factor is the selection of the people around you. Surround yourself with those who bring peace, growth, and positive energy. The best defense against other people's stupidity is a life where idiots have no place. If you've spent years dealing with idiots, you might have gotten used to relationships where irony, passive-aggressiveness, and disrespect are the norm. But that doesn't have to be your reality. You can and should cultivate relationships built on genuine respect, support, and understanding. Don't settle for anything less. Robert Sutton teaches us that one of the most effective ways to neutralize the impact of idiots in our lives is by strengthening our emotional resilience. This means learning to filter out unfair criticism, building solid self-esteem, and developing a sharp sense of humor to avoid taking everything too seriously. In the end, the problem isn't always the idiot. It's the space we allow them to take up in our minds. Another key point is setting clear boundaries. Many people suffer because of idiots simply because they struggle to say no or to cut off interactions that don't serve them. But remember, no one can mistreat you without your ongoing permission. Whenever someone crosses your limits, make it known. If they persist, reduce contact. And if the environment becomes unbearable, walk away. You don't have to endure a space that drains your energy. Sutton also warns us about something most people overlook: making sure we don't become idiots ourselves. Yes, because the danger of being around toxic people is that little by little, you may start absorbing their behavior. Have you noticed that after spending too much time in a negative environment, your patience wears thin and you start responding the same way? That's the toxicity cycle, and breaking free from it requires self-awareness. Ask yourself, am I reacting to an idiot, or am I becoming one? The ultimate way to regain your sanity is to shift your focus. The more you think and talk about idiots, the more space they take up in your life. The best way to beat them isn't just to ignore them, but to build something so positive and fulfilling that their presence becomes irrelevant. Invest in what makes you happy, in people who bring you peace, and in a purpose that goes beyond just surviving the chaos. At the end of the day, idiots only have the power you allow them to have. When you learn how to handle them, you realize that the greatest trick of all isn't defeating them. It's making them completely irrelevant. If you've made it this far, congratulations. It means you're committed to protecting your sanity and refusing to let idiots control your life. And this is a path that few dare to take. Let's be honest. It's much easier to complain about idiots than to learn how to deal with them. It's more comfortable to stay frustrated than to develop strategies to neutralize their impact. But now, you have the tools. Idiots will always exist. At work, in your family, in your social circles. What changes is how you choose to interact with them. You can keep reacting the same way exhausting yourself and getting dragged down by their toxicity. Or you can take a different path, ignore strategically, respond intelligently, and, whenever possible, walk away from what doesn't serve you. You can cling to anger and resentment, or you can just let go and move on. The most important thing to remember is that your peace of mind is worth more than any argument. Not every idiot deserves a response. Not every battle needs to be won. And at the end of the day, true power isn't about winning a debate. It's about not needing to enter one in the first place. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the worst experience you've had with an idiot? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. I bet everyone here has at least one to tell. And of course, if this video made sense to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not just because I'm asking. Okay, yes, I am asking, but also because this type of content needs to reach more people struggling with other people's stupidity. And before you go, check out these videos popping up on your screen. One of them might help you handle those seemingly impossible situations even better. Which one? Well, you'll only find out if you click. See you in the next one, and remember, the best way to defeat an idiot is to live well enough that they stop mattering.
Why did some of the greatest minds in history prefer solitude? Was it a trait of genius or simply a symptom of alienation? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most pessimistic and visionary philosophers of the 19th century, had an answer. And it was anything but kind to society. To him, the world was full of superficial people, trapped in trivial conversations and meaningless distractions. Genius, by its very nature, demanded distance from this mediocre spectacle. Solitude is the fate of all exceptional spirits, he said. But was he right? Or were great thinkers simply incapable of connecting with others? Think about it. Nikola Tesla, Emily Dickinson, Isaac Newton. All geniuses, all isolated. Is this a privilege reserved for the intellectually superior, or just a curse disguised as a virtue? Imagine a genius completely immersed in his thoughts. While the world moves on and people talk about the weather or the latest trends, he reflects on the fate of humanity, on the mysteries of the universe. His mind operates on another level, and the deeper he dives into his inner world, the harder it becomes to find someone to share it with. Schopenhauer was certain. Superior intelligence creates a natural barrier. It's not that these individuals hate society. It's that they simply don't fit in. While most people are distracted by the immediate, they seek the eternal. While many are content with the surface, they plunge into the depths. And that contrast isolates them. Tesla avoided human contact because he saw it as a distraction. Nietzsche said that the crowd is a sea in which free spirits drown. And if you look at history, you'll see this pattern again and again. The brightest minds tend to walk alone. But here's the problem. Solitude can be a refuge, but it can also be a prison. Because while distancing yourself from mediocrity allows for clarity of thought, it can also make you a stranger in your own world. Many of these geniuses weren't just solitary, they were also tormented. Depression, anxiety, the feeling of not belonging. All of it was part of both their greatness and their burden. So the big question arises. Is this isolation a curse or a blessing? For Schopenhauer, the answer was clear. Great thinkers shouldn't just accept their solitude, they should embrace it as a gift. Only in silence and far from social mediocrity could they achieve their greatest accomplishments. He didn't see social life as a space for genuine exchange, but rather as a grand theater where everyone played a predefined role, hiding their true intentions behind carefully constructed masks. Sociability, for most, is nothing more than a mask that hides their banality, he said. To him, society was nothing more than a stage where appearances reigned over authenticity. This view was directly tied to his major work, The World as Will and Representation, where he argued that everything we perceive is merely a projection of our minds. In his eyes, social life wasn't real, it was a distraction, a spectacle that kept people from true knowledge. And here's the problem. Most people are trapped in trivial concerns. Status, gossip, petty disputes for recognition. All of this, to Schopenhauer, was proof that the average human is a slave to the will, a blind, irrational impulse that drags us endlessly in an unrelenting search for validation. But while most people drowned in this superficial routine, those with a sharper intellect saw everything with brutal and almost cruel clarity. To them, society was nothing more than a hollow game where relationships rarely went beyond the surface. This disdain for social life wasn't exclusive to Schopenhauer. Other great thinkers felt the same disillusionment. Nietzsche, for instance, claimed that everything done for the love of the crowd is done poorly. And Pascal went even further, saying, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Nietzsche, for example, stated that convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies, highlighting how people prefer to cling to illusions rather than face reality with honesty. This conflict between the pursuit of knowledge and the demands of social life created an unbridgeable chasm between the brightest minds and the rest of humanity. The result was inevitable: intellectual isolation. But this isolation did not come without consequences. Prolonged solitude could lead to disillusionment, apathy, and even contempt for the outside world. Schopenhauer was aware of this risk and warned that, for those who could see beyond the social illusion, the only alternative was to accept this reality and learn to live with it. But how does this isolation manifest in daily life? Why do those who are intellectually superior often feel frustrated with social interactions? In the next section, we will explore the clash between genius and mediocrity, and how this inevitably drives great thinkers away from ordinary life. Schopenhauer did not hold back in expressing his views on humanity. To him, most people were guided by superficial and selfish interests, with no inclination toward contemplation or deep thought. This created an inevitable abyss between those endowed with exceptional intelligence and the masses, whom he saw as distracted by trivialities and futility. Mediocrity generally only recognizes itself. Genius, on the other hand, sees mediocrity, but finds itself alone. This intellectual isolation arises because the thinker, by nature, seeks to understand the world in depth, while the majority are preoccupied with banalities like status, gossip, or fleeting entertainment. While the genius strives to unravel the mysteries of existence, they often encounter indifference or incomprehension when attempting to share their ideas. This explains why so many great thinkers felt frustrated with society. Schopenhauer himself despised mingling with ordinary people, as he believed that the mediocrity of the majority stifled the genius of the few. This thought echoes Voltaire's famous statement, "The secret to being boring is to tell everything you know." The problem is not just the difficulty of communication, but the difference in interests. While the genius seeks universal truths, the majority seeks only pleasure and distraction. This conflict is inevitable. For Schopenhauer, this intellectual imbalance made social interaction a burden for those with an elevated mind. We can see this dynamic reflected in countless historical figures. Nikola Tesla avoided social events and trivial interactions, viewing them as a waste of time. Isaac Newton was known for his reclusiveness and impatience with mundane conversations. Even Albert Einstein, one of the most celebrated scientists in history, admitted that he preferred solitude over the company of those who did not share his interest in profound ideas. But this distancing from the world is not always by choice. Often, it is society itself that rejects the genius. Innovative and unconventional thinking tends to provoke discomfort and resistance. Nietzsche called this the resentment of mediocrity, the tendency of ordinary people to despise and attack what they do not understand or what makes them feel inferior. Thus, the genius does not only withdraw by their own will, they are also pushed away by the hostility of the world around them. This forced solitude can lead to feelings of alienation and even contempt for social life. And here arises a fundamental question. If the world is a hostile place for great thinkers, how should they face this reality? Schopenhauer believed there was a solution, and it did not involve trying to fit into society, but rather accepting and cultivating solitude as a refuge for thought and contemplation. Is solitude a destiny or a choice? For Schopenhauer, it was both. He saw isolation as an inevitable result of superior intelligence, but also as an opportunity for intellectual and spiritual growth. The common man cannot endure solitude because he only feels comfortable in the company of others. The elevated man seeks solitude because in it, he finds himself. This vision leads us to an essential point. Solitude is not a punishment but a privilege. It offers the thinker the opportunity to immerse themselves in their own ideas without distractions, without the need to conform to the empty social conventions that dominate everyday life. It is in that silent space where creativity flourishes and understanding deepens. Many of history's greatest thinkers, scientists, and artists made solitude their inseparable companion. Emily Dickinson spent most of her life isolated in her home, dedicating herself exclusively to writing. Kant was known for his meticulous routine and indifference toward social events. Beethoven, in his increasing deafness, found in isolation the strength to create some of the most powerful symphonies in history. Solitude not only allows for greater depth in thought, but also preserves the authenticity of genius. Schopenhauer believed that by engaging too much with society, the brilliant mind risks getting lost in distractions and compromising its clarity of vision. This perspective strongly resonates with the Buddhist concept of detachment. Buddhism, one of Schopenhauer's major philosophical influences, teaches that attachment to the external world and social interactions often leads to suffering. True growth occurs in introspection and in distancing oneself from the illusions of the material world. However, a dilemma arises here. Human beings are, by nature, social animals. The search for belonging is part of our biology, and prolonged solitude can lead to distress and melancholy. Even the greatest thinkers, despite valuing isolation, suffered from the lack of meaningful connections. Nietzsche, for instance, who also saw solitude as a path to greatness, admitted that it could be painful. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he describes the philosopher as a hermit who descends from the mountain to share his wisdom, only to be met with rejection and misunderstanding. This dilemma is real. Distancing oneself from society brings freedom, but it also carries an existential burden that is difficult to bear. Schopenhauer, however, had a solution for this problem. He believed that although the genius could never fully fit into society, there was a way to interact with the world without being affected by its mediocrity: the adoption of philosophical detachment. A kind of emotional neutrality that allowed one to coexist with others without becoming too involved. And this strategy leads us to the final point. How can one navigate the world without being consumed by its superficiality? If having a brilliant mind means ending up alone, how did the great thinkers manage to live in society without feeling suffocated by so much triviality? Schopenhauer had an answer for this: the strategy of detachment, or rather, good old philosophical disengagement. Happiness belongs to those who are self-sufficient. For him, the key was not in seeking society's acceptance, but in building an inner fortress that allowed the individual to be the master of their own existence. The secret was not in trying to fit in or striving to change others, but in developing an attitude of serene detachment, like an observer analyzing reality without being affected by it. Schopenhauer suggested that instead of fighting against the world's mediocrity, the thinker should learn to face it with the same attitude a scientist adopts when observing an experiment: with curiosity, but without emotional involvement. This means accepting the banality of social life without becoming irritated by it, understanding the intellectual limitations of the majority without frustration, and maintaining one's mental independence without feeling the need for external validation. This strategy is similar to the approach of the Stoics, who advocated for emotional control in the face of adversity. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest exponents, wrote in his Meditations, "Give yourself a gift, the gift of indifference to what is beyond your control." The world will always be filled with futile distractions and empty conversations, but it is up to the individual to decide how much of it is worth their attention. The thinker should not isolate themselves completely from society, but rather interact with it strategically, absorbing only what is useful and discarding the irrelevant. Despite having little patience for society, Schopenhauer did not believe total isolation was the solution. He knew that even great thinkers needed some level of human contact, whether to exchange ideas or to avoid sinking into absolute solitude. The secret, according to him, was choosing wisely whom to connect with and keeping interactions to a minimum, just enough to live in the world without losing one's sanity. This philosophy remains applicable today. In a world filled with digital distractions, fake news, and superficial relationships, knowing how to filter information and interactions is essential. Intelligence is not just about understanding the world, it is about knowing how to navigate it without losing oneself. Schopenhauer teaches us that, instead of lamenting the lack of connection with most people, we should see it as a sign of our intellectual freedom. After all, solitude can be a burden, but also a privilege, an opportunity to explore our own thoughts without external interference. And now, the question arises: would you rather adapt to the world, or accept it as it is and preserve your intellectual freedom? If you've made it this far, you've probably already realized that the relationship between intelligence and isolation is not just a quirk of fate, but a natural consequence of deep thinking. Schopenhauer showed us that great minds often find more comfort in solitude than in the company of the crowd. Not out of arrogance, but because the superficiality of social interactions can be exhausting for those who see beyond appearances. The smarter a person is, the more prone they are to solitude. But does this mean that being alone is the only path? Not necessarily. The secret lies in understanding that solitude doesn't have to be seen as a punishment, but as a refuge. Being alone doesn't mean being abandoned. It means having time to think, reflect, and grow without the distractions and pressures of society. And perhaps that is the true test of intelligence. Knowing how to balance between the world and introspection, choosing when to connect and when to step away. Schopenhauer gives us the key to this freedom, but it's up to each of us to decide how to use it. If you've made it this far, I'm sure you've felt that strange mix of freedom and isolation that Schopenhauer described at some point. Intelligence can be a refuge, but also a prison. Don't you think? But you know what? There's something deeply liberating in accepting that not every silence needs to be filled. Not every connection is worth the effort. You're not alone in this journey. It may feel lonely, but in the end, as old Arthur once said, solitude is not the problem. The problem is the wrong company. I remember once, after hours lost in a book, I found myself staring at the wall, reflecting on some grand idea, until someone interrupted my philosophical moment to ask if I had seen the latest soap opera or heard the gossip of the day. It was at that moment that I realized, wanting deeper conversations isn't arrogance. It's a necessity. If this has ever happened to you, you know how frustrating it is to feel like you're speaking a different language. Like your mind is sailing in an ocean, while others insist on splashing in a puddle. But you know what? There's an upside to this. You don't have to get lost in the noise. You have the privilege of choosing your solitude. And now, let's be serious. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Or, if you prefer, you can ignore all of this and go back to that fascinating conversation about the weather and the latest TikTok trend. But let's be honest. If you made it this far, you already know you deserve more stimulating debates, right? And if this video made you think, wait until you see what I have prepared for you next. 2 videos that will leave you even more restless. In the best way, of course. But consider this your warning. After watching them, you may never see the world the same way again. Click at your own risk.
Are they really yours? Or are they part of a system designed to keep you trapped in a hamster wheel, chasing a reward that never comes? Think about this. How many times have you felt fulfilled, only to realize minutes later that the emptiness is still there? You eat what you crave, watch what entertains you, buy what makes you happy. But there's always a but, a void that never disappears. That is the hidden cost of pleasure in the modern world. Aldous Huxley saw it coming. He didn't imagine a future of brutal repression, but a dictatorship of pleasure. A system where prisoners love their chains because they believe they are decorations. And the worst part is, it works. Why is it so hard for you to sit in silence with yourself? Why does a single moment of boredom feel like torture? It's not a coincidence. It's the result of meticulous programming, instant gratification, endless entertainment, ultra-processed food, pornography, social media, all designed to make you believe you're enjoying yourself when, in reality, you're just being domesticated. But here's the problem. Nothing in this world is free. What seems like a gift is actually a transaction, and the product is you. Every time you eat something sugary, your brain releases dopamine. You feel good. But then the crash comes, and you need more. Not because you truly need it, but because you've been programmed to crave it. The same happens with social media. A video, an image, a comment, a dopamine hit. But it vanishes in seconds, and you need another, and another, and another, until your attention is shattered into pieces so small that you can no longer focus on anything. We've been led to believe that pleasure equals happiness, but it doesn't. Happiness grows over time. Pleasure fades in seconds. And here's the trick. The more dependent you become on pleasure, the less capable you are of finding happiness. Huxley warned us, it won't be necessary to force us because we will learn to love our servitude. They will give us pleasure in precise doses to keep us docile, distracted, controllable. And the worst part is that when someone tells us this to our face, we won't even want to escape. Look around you. How many people can disconnect from instant gratification? How many can endure silence, effort, patience? We live in a society that traded effort for shortcuts, discipline for distraction, purpose for cheap pleasure. And the worst part is that they've convinced you this is how it's supposed to be. Every time you can't put down your screen, every time you need another bite of junk food, every time fast entertainment is more appealing than your own growth, it's not you. It's the system that trained you to chase rewards without noticing the price you pay for them. And the price isn't money. It's your mind, your ability to think, your patience, your resilience, your willpower. The real slavery isn't the one imposed with chains, but the one you accept without realizing it. Aldous Huxley understood it before anyone else. You are not controlled by force, but by your desires. But the question is, are you going to keep paying that price? Or better yet, are you going to stop? Because freedom was never free. And in a world where everyone has been trained to chase pleasure instead of meaning, the most revolutionary act is to take back your ability to resist, to say no. But is that decision really yours? Think about this. When was the last time you experienced pleasure without guilt? And when was the last time you enjoyed something without feeling the need to repeat it compulsively? That's what they've done to us. They've conditioned us to believe that pleasure equals happiness. But what they've really given us is addiction. Addiction to everything that keeps us distracted. Because pleasure has an enemy, the void. And the void is unbearable for the modern mind. We can't tolerate it. We don't know what to do with it. If there's a moment of silence, we fill it with noise. If there's a second of calm, we drown it in content. If we feel even a hint of discomfort, we numb it with food, with dopamine, with more distractions. We do anything except face the most dangerous question of all. What would happen if I just stopped? If you stop consuming constant stimuli, something unsettling happens. the real you emerges. Not the version edited for social media, not the one fueled by instant gratification, but the version you've ignored for years. And that version isn't always comfortable, because in silence you uncover what truly bothers you. You confront your insecurities, your fears, your weaknesses. And here's the most terrifying part. You realize that pleasure was never the solution, just a temporary escape. Aldous Huxley predicted this with chilling accuracy. In Brave New World, citizens were programmed to consume pleasure through soma, a drug that erased any trace of discomfort or questioning. No wars, no conflicts, just a humanity lost in euphoric lethargy, incapable of seeing its own prison. That's exactly what we live in today. We don't have soma, but we have limitless entertainment, food engineered for addiction, social media that simulates human connection without offering anything real. And every time we feel something is wrong, instead of facing the problem, we simply increase the dose. They've turned us into consumers of ourselves, and we don't even realize it. We're willing to pay with our energy, our mental health, and our autonomy just for the illusion that pleasure will erase discomfort. And here's the darkest truth. It never does. It only hides it, postpones it, disguises it, and when it returns, it hits even harder. That's why there's more anxiety than ever, more depression, more dissatisfaction, because instant gratification isn't a solution, it's a distraction. We've become dependent on it, yet we feel emptier than ever. How many times have you felt that wave of sadness after indulging in something pleasurable? That moment when, after finishing your favorite show, you feel like something is missing. When you eat exactly what you craved, yet something still feels off. When you spend hours on social media, only to feel like you've gained nothing. It's not a coincidence. It's the system working exactly as designed. The problem is that by the time you realize this, for many, it's already too late. Because dopamine doesn't just make you feel good, it binds you. It's the hormone of reward, but also the hormone of conditioning. Every time you receive pleasure without effort, you reinforce the habit of seeking more. And the more you seek, the less you can enjoy what you already have. Because pleasure tolerance works like any other addiction. What once satisfied you is no longer enough. And so, the chase never ends. That is the real price of pleasure in the modern world. It's not paid with money. It's paid with the deterioration of your ability to enjoy real life, with the inability to feel satisfaction without external stimuli, with the erosion of your willpower, with the gradual disappearance of your identity. Because when everything you consume is designed to make you feel good effortlessly, you lose connection with who you really are. And that is exactly what they want. They don't want someone who questions. They don't want someone who resists. They don't want someone who can sit in silence without feeling the need for a distraction. They want you to depend, to need, to keep chasing that fleeting pleasure without realizing that, in the pursuit, you lose yourself. But here's the most terrifying part. Pleasure is not the enemy. Dopamine is not bad. The problem isn't pleasure itself, but how you use it. If pleasure is the reward for something you've built with effort, it strengthens you. If pleasure is an escape to avoid discomfort, it destroys you. Think about this. The best things in life require patience. Building a strong body takes time. Learning a skill requires discipline. Developing deep relationships demands effort. But none of these things offer an instant reward. They don't generate immediate dopamine. They don't give you pleasure right away. And that's why we avoid them. Because the modern mind has been conditioned to prefer the quick over the valuable, the immediate over the meaningful. But there is a way out, and it's brutal. It means learning to tolerate the void. It means learning to be uncomfortable without seeking refuge in easy pleasure. It means reclaiming control over your attention. And that doesn't happen in a day. There's no quick fix. There's no magic pill. It means sitting in silence and listening to your anxiety without suppressing it. It means resisting the urge for instant gratification and learning to enjoy the process instead of just the outcome. It means abandoning comfort and facing the reality that pleasure, when it's free, always comes at a hidden cost. That is the path few take, because it requires a strength most have lost. But here's the secret. The ability to resist immediate gratification is the foundation of any real achievement. Any success, any great work. Anyone who has changed their life has faced this same dilemma. Will I be a slave to my pleasure or the architect of my destiny? Aldous Huxley saw this coming, and now so do you. The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you keep consuming without questioning, or will you dare to challenge the programming? The answer to that question defines more than you think. It defines whether you are free or just another piece of the system. The choice is yours. Or at least, it should be. But here's the real question. Now that you know, what will you do with this information? Because seeing it isn't enough. Understanding it changes nothing if you keep acting the same way. The system doesn't collapse just because you've discovered it. Your mind isn't freed just because you understand the trap. The only way to break the cycle is to make the decision that almost no one makes. Resist. Resist the urge for instant gratification. Resist the need to be constantly stimulated. Resist the temptation of what is easy, comfortable, instant. Because quick pleasure is a hook. But freedom is a weapon, and only those who dare to wield it responsibly can truly own their destiny. Look around. Most won't do it. They will keep consuming without questioning. They will keep trading their time, their energy, and their ability to think for one more dose of dopamine. And when they realize it, when they wake up from this collective hypnosis, it might be too late, but you still have a choice. And it's now or never. Because if you don't decide today to take back control of your mind, when will you? Tomorrow? Next week? When you feel ready? Let me tell you something. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Either you make the decision today, or you stay trapped in the same cycle for the rest of your life. So tell me, what will you do? If you've made it this far, if you've listened to every word and you're still watching this video, I want you to do something. Go to the comments and write, "I own my mind." Because that means you didn't just listen. You're ready to take action. And if this video made you think, if it made you question yourself even for a second, make sure to subscribe. Because this isn't the usual content designed to distract you. Here, we are here to wake up, to understand, to face the truth that few dare to see. I'll see you in the next video. But remember, change doesn't begin when you listen to me. Change begins when you decide to act. There are loves that are not love. They are a trap. It all starts like a perfect fairy tale, as if someone had written the story just for you. Everything fits, everything flows, everything seems too good to be true. And that's the first sign. Because while you believe you've found something real, something else is happening in the shadows. Something you don't see, but that slowly starts wrapping around you. It doesn't arrive with screams or warnings. It arrives with whispers, with words that, at first, sound like compliments, but end up planting doubts in your mind, with gestures that seem harmless but slowly shape you without you realizing it. And when you do, it's already too late. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how strong you think you are, or how prepared you may be. Because this kind of love doesn't destroy you all at once. It does it slowly. Until one day, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize who you are. It starts with small comments disguised as concern, with jokes that are actually criticisms, with protection that gradually turns into control. At first, you don't notice it because everything seems normal. But then, something changes. You start to feel watched, but you don't know from where. Questioned, but you don't know why. Trapped, but with no visible bars. That's the problem with modern love. It's no longer about loving, but about possessing, about proving, about competing. Not with strangers, but with the ghosts of your partner's past. With people you've never seen but who live in their memories. And without realizing it, you get caught in a game you can't win. Because the problem was never you. It was never your flaws. It was never your way of loving. The problem is that love, as we know it, is contaminated. So ask yourself this: do you really love the person you're with? Or do you just love the version of yourself you believe you are when you're with them? The difference is brutal, and most people never dare to face it. That's why they end up trapped in relationships where love is no longer love, but fear of loneliness, jealousy disguised as care, envy disguised as passion. If something inside you tells you that something doesn't add up, listen to it. Because what comes next is worse, much worse. It's not paranoia, it's instinct. If you ignore it, you'll get lost in a labyrinth with no way out. Here's the truth no one tells you. Most people don't know how to love. Not because they don't want to, but because they never learned. Because the love they know isn't love. It's a power game. A constant struggle for control, where the one who feels the least is the one who wins. And if you fall into that game, you will lose more than just a relationship. You will lose parts of yourself that you will never get back. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't arrive with screams or violence. It doesn't come with obvious threats. It comes with small signs that seem insignificant. A doubtful glance when you talk about someone, a casual comment about how you dress, a joke disguised as mockery that you let slide because it's not a big deal. And just like that, little by little, the line between love and manipulation starts to blur. By the time you realize it, it's too late. You don't just doubt your relationship, you doubt yourself. You used to be secure, confident, knowing exactly what you wanted. Now, every decision passes through an invisible filter. Will it bother them? Am I overreacting? Is it my fault? And this is where many fall. They confuse anxiety with intensity, control with care, fear with love. But real love doesn't feel like this. Real love gives you peace, not unanswered questions. Real love makes you free, not a prisoner of uncertainty. The problem isn't just the wrong partner. It's the world that has sold us a lie. They taught us that love hurts, that jealousy is proof of love, that passion has to be a hurricane. But there's nothing romantic about living in fear of losing someone. There's nothing special about measuring every word to avoid triggering an emotional explosion. There's nothing beautiful about feeling like a replaceable piece in a game you never asked to play. The world doesn't want you to see it. Because the day you do, you will stop being easy to manipulate. You will stop accepting emotional scraps. You will stop believing that you deserve half-hearted love. And when you start demanding something real, most people will disappear. Because many people don't want to love. They want someone to dominate. They're not looking for a partner. They're looking for an extension of their ego. So now you have to ask yourself a question. Do you want to keep playing this game? Or are you ready to leave? Because there are two types of people in this world. Those who wake up, and those who remain asleep, believing that love is synonymous with suffering. And if this truth hurts you, if something inside you resists accepting it, it's because deep down you know you've been living a lie. But here comes the hardest part. No one is coming to save you. There won't be a magical moment where everything clicks and makes sense. There's only one decision to make. Keep losing yourself in someone else, or start finding yourself. And now, here you are, facing a decision you didn't even know you had to make. You keep wondering if all of this is true. If maybe you're overreacting. If perhaps it's normal to feel this anxiety, this fear of losing someone, this constant need to prove your worth. But tell me, since when did love become a test? Since when did it stop being a refuge and turn into a battlefield? The answer is simple. Since you let someone else define your worth. Since you allowed their insecurities to become your own. Since you started believing that without this person, you weren't enough. But here's the truth no one tells you. You were already enough before they arrived. And you will still be enough when they leave. Because in this world, there's a brutal reality that few want to accept. The love of another person doesn't complete you. It doesn't save you. It doesn't define you. It only walks beside you. And when it stops doing that, the road still continues. So tell me, what are you going to do now? Stay in a relationship where you question yourself more than you grow. Justify the unjustifiable just to avoid being alone. Because listen carefully, loneliness is not the enemy. The real enemy is being with someone who makes you feel alone, even when they're right beside you. And if after all this, you're still doubting, try this. Imagine someone you love, a sibling, a friend, someone who matters to you, tells you they're in a relationship like yours, that they feel what you feel. What would you tell them? Would you tell them to endure it? That it's normal to feel this way? Or would you tell them to run? The difference is it's easier to see the truth when you're not the one trapped in it. But now you know. You can't pretend you didn't hear it. You can't close your eyes again. The only thing you can do is decide what to do with this truth. And if you've made it this far, I want you to prove it. Leave a comment. Real love doesn't trap. It sets you free. I want to see how many are brave enough to accept this truth, and how many will keep choosing to live in a lie. If this video made you think, if at any moment you felt like it was speaking directly to you, it's because you needed to hear it. Subscribe, because this is just the beginning. The truth hurts, but it's the only path to freedom. See you in the next video.